Now back to Inside Real Estate. Here's Mike the Realtor.
Hey folks, we are back inside Real Estate Sports and Entertainment. Mike Kruizinga, your host. Special edition, afternoon edition here Sunday afternoon on a Stars playoff day. Big time entertainment segment we got coming up here. We've got New York Times best-selling author James Rollins with us on our entertainment segment. We're going to be talking with him about his newly released book, Warhawk, a Tucker Wayne novel, and hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about The Bone Labyrinth, the recently released book as part of the latest Sigma novel of the Sigma series. Mr. Rollins, are you on the line with us?
I sure am.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to come on to the show with us. We certainly really, really appreciate it. And longtime fan, I've read all the Sigma. I'm a huge Sigma fan. And just kind of like a kid in a candy store to talk to you. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I thought maybe we'd start a little bit about talking about your background a little bit. Maybe a lot of the folks, if they haven't heard of you, haven't read your books, then maybe they've been in a coma for a while, but maybe they're awake. And let's talk a little bit about maybe your background, and this kind of leads into the Warhawk a little bit. But by trade, you were a veterinarian. Is that right?
I was indeed, and I it's nice to be on the bestseller list, but my greatest claim to fame is I can still neuter a cat in under 30 seconds. So I still do a little bit of volunteer work with my veterinary degree, but now I do write full-time. That's, I guess, my full-time profession now. And I just use my veterinary degree as a hobby. So I guess, removing genitalia from cat is a pretty good hobby.
Yes, I guess it is. Let's get into the Sigma series a little bit. Obviously, Tucker and Kane came out as a spinoff from the Sigma series. They first showed up in Bloodline. Let's talk about, for the folks who don't know, about the Sigma series a little bit of the genesis of the Sigma series and its background, and then we'll kind of move forward in time, to the Bone Labyrinth, and then obviously into Warhawk. Yeah,
well, Sigma started out basically they're a group of Special Forces soldiers, former Special Forces soldiers that have been recruited by DARPA, the Defense Department's Research and Development Organization, and they're retrained in various scientific disciplines to defend U.S. shores against various types of threats. They're basically, as I described them, they're scientists with guns, for lack of a better description. And so each book is sort of a different adventure that explores some aspect of science and history and political events, and they end up generally being a big roller coaster ride.
Yeah, absolutely. They are definitely one heck of a roller coaster ride, that's for sure. I think you always mix, you're such an excellent storyteller in that you mix, historical topics with how it relates here in the future, kind of cutting edge topics in science and technology and blending all of those things. And, a lot of these things, we've never even heard of, or they're very cutting edge, but probably they're already out there and happening or very close to happening, a lot of which are very scary, and you bring up a lot of questions about should we be doing these things, and some of these things where it's in science and technology, and they're pushing the envelope for the betterment of humanity, but it's sometimes very questionably on the ethics side.
Exactly. I mean, to me, I'm always looking for that historical mystery, maybe that piece of history that ends in a question mark that I can explore in the novel, but then I try to tie it to something that's maybe ripped from the headlines, a little bit of science that maybe is in people's minds. And it's not so much the technology that necessarily interests me, because, yes, the cogs and the wheels of the technology are nice to grind my characters through. They can build a big, exciting plot with the technology behind it. But to me, with the fun of exploring this book, exploring the technology in the books is those moral questions. In Warhawk, the book that just came out, I bring up the topics of drone warfare. There's two sides to that story. Yes, it's nice not to have boots on the ground and put American soldiers at risk by being able to employ these robots in the skies that can go out and shoot. But now, as we're looking just at the crest of the horizon, even when I was writing this book, I had to keep changing the book almost on the fly because things were changing so rapidly in this whole concept, is that these drones are becoming more and more autonomous. They're able to function with limited amounts of human intervention. And so I wrote this book looking beyond the horizon. What if we get to the point where they can actually function independently? They can have shoot to fire or shoot to kill orders without actually having a human behind that toggle switch. And, I thought I was, broaching on science fiction when I was writing this novel, but upon completing it just in February, Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, and Stephen Hawking and one of the U.S. generals were put out a letter basically saying, we need to draw the line in the sand, saying that, yes, drone warfare is great, but eventually we cannot give full control, autonomous control to these drones. That we do have to have a human involvement, a human element into these shoot-to-kill orders.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I thought was very interesting, and as part of the book raised some very interesting questions. Could we get to that point where the humans are taken out of the equation with artificial intelligence getting as good as it is? That's a very scary thought, both really abroad and, potentially here with the rapid increase of use in drone technology.
Right. I mean, I've got for my resource when I was writing this book, I have a couple of friends in DARPA, and they're at this point. I mean, I don't know if people have seen some of these new robots that DARPA's been experimenting with. These machines that can basically run across different terrains for carrying different hardware or cargo. But they are already at the point where these drones can operate almost independently. We're just at the point of taking the leash off of these drones and having them operate totally independently.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very scary, but extremely entertaining in this book, The Warhawk. And because some of the other questions that it kind of brought up in the book as well was, the use of private military contractors and how they have thrived in the recent, really last decade and a half, since our military has sort of pushed off a lot of responsibilities to the military contractors, and not just here in the U.S., but globally as well, and how they are playing into, geopolitics, and the lines are blurred on whose responsibility, our tax dollars go to the government, they give them to the private military contractors, and then something happens, who's responsible?
Yeah, I mean, that shift has been going for about the last decade. We've been seeing this shift in responsibility shifting from the military to the basic corporate boardrooms. And it was a matter of efficiency, because a lot of times corporations can sometimes run a bit more efficient than the government does. I think we're well aware of that in many regards.
Sure.
And so there's some benefit to that. But when doing so, and we're seeing this shift occur, more and more, is that the question then becomes, who is really orchestrating a war? Is the U.S. government orchestrating this battlefield, or is it a corporate board where maybe success is judged by, not winning or losing, but on profitability? And then, of course, you have to look at accountability. Who's really in charge? And this change is occurring very rapidly. And as when change occurs rapidly, sometimes people make mistakes. When trying to save money or balance budgets, sometimes we make the wrong choice. Yeah,
absolutely. And the question I have is, what happens when some of these private military organizations, whether it be, here at the U.S. or globally, what happens, when their agenda, is in conflict with the government's agenda? And so what happens there?
Hey, and that's the exact point, is that oftentimes when it comes to these private defense contractors, the question is more the profitability. Is it more profitable to lose this battle at the cost of maybe U.S. interests? And when it comes down to being the corporate boardrooms have to reply to their investors, that oftentimes the wrong choice is made. And we've actually have examples of that already occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, as part of this, in the last decade and a half, as this has become more popular to push operations over to the private side, is our own U.S. government military and the various branches, suffer losses that we don't need to be suffering.
Also, it's a matter of secrecy. Corporations like to keep their corporate trademarks, their corporate secrets, and so when you have various corporations operating different parts of the military, oftentimes they're not willing to speak to each other. And as well as everybody pretty much can imagine, and when it comes to operating a large battlefield type of situation, when you don't have the pieces talking to each other, you're likely to have some issues on that battlefield.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, folks, by the way, we're talking with New York Times bestselling author James Rollins. We're talking about Warhawk, recently released a book. Folks, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come on back, and I'd like to get into the main characters of this story, Tucker and Kane. Mr. Rollins, if you can hang on with us for a second, we're going to take a quick break. Folks, Inside Real Estate, Sports, Entertainment, back in a few.
Now back to Inside Real Estate. Here's Mike the Realtor.
Hey, folks, we are back inside real estate, sports, and entertainment. Mike Kruizinga, your host. We're back. Hey, we're on our entertainment segment. We're talking with New York Times bestselling author James Rollins. Just released Warhawk. This is a Tucker Wayne novel, co-author with Grant Blackwood. This is the second in this series. Kill Switch was the first one. By the way, Grant Blackwood, he looks like Phil Simms. Don't you think?
I didn't think about that until you mentioned that. Yes.
I saw it on the jacket. I was like, he is absolutely a doppelganger for Phil Simms. He really is. Well, let's get into these characters a little bit. Obviously, they were revealed in Bloodline in the Sigma series. You spun them off. The first book was Kill Switch. This is the second book. And I know you were on a USO tour, and I understand you got to witness firsthand that how a handler works with a war dog. And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as an author, I always got my antenna up looking for maybe that next great idea or a character. And so the USO wanted to do a test balloon. They never had authors go out into the field and try to entertain the troops. They've had rock stars and cheerleaders, and they said, well, let's send them authors, see if there'd be any interest. And they weren't sure. So me and four other authors back in the winter of 2010 went out to Iraq and Kuwait. It was a great experience. I got to meet a lot of great men and women out in the field. But me being a veterinarian, I saw some dogs working out in the field, and I'm just curious about, how they dealt with these dogs. Did they just treat their dogs as as equivalent of a weapon? Was it a sidearm for these gentlemen out there? And I found out it was the exact opposite. That these guys they train together, they eat together, they're sleeping in the same trenches with their dogs, and they have a really deep bond that establishes. And I kept hearing this one phrase from different handlers I was speaking to, both out in the field and when I came back home. And the phrase is, it runs down the lead. And what that means that over time, because they're so tied together so often, that over time that the pair begins to read each other's body language. They understand each other beyond mere gesture or spoken command, and that the emotions of the two sort of run up and down that leash that connects them. It binds them intimately together. And I never really saw that pairing, this sort of dynamic duo in print before. So I thought, gosh, I'm going to try to write that pair of characters into a book. And so when I was constructing the story Bloodline, where Tucker and Kane first appear, I wanted to try to capture that relationship. And initially I was just trying to capture it from one end of the leash, from Tucker's point of view, the soldier's point of view. But I thought, well, that's not quite fair. Let me go ahead and look at the other end of the leash. And so in the book, in both Kill Switch and Warhawk, I do this also, is I write scenes from the military war dog's perspective, from Kane's perspective. So I want to take my background as a veterinarian and what I learned both from talking to the handlers out in the field and going to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, where I sort of learned more about how they train these dogs. And I wanted to sort of take my readers and try to put them into the four paws of that dog and sort of experience what it means to be a military dog. So I actually wrote several scenes in each of the books from the dog's point of view, so that you can sort of experience what it means to be that dog.
Yeah, and I thought that was extremely interesting because you don't really see that. And I thought what you did was, you took the war dog and really, you made it a real character instead of just sort of a passing character in the story. It actually became a real character, and I think as a reader, you become really connected to that character doing what you did. And I thought that was extremely interesting. You did that as well in Bone Labyrinth with Baco as well, I noticed.
I did, yeah. I mean, I enjoyed doing that with Kane, but I thought, when I was writing Bone Labyrinth, which features a Western Mountain gorilla as a significant character in the book, I thought I'm going to sort of borrow that type of aspect, and I started writing scenes from Baco's point of view, sort of, again, to sort of explore what it means to be a gorilla, that these aren't just dumb beasts, that they have an entire internal world, that they do have an understand concept of past, present, and future, that they have a sense of self. And so, again, right now there's a big turning point occurring here in the U.S., and again, this happened when I was writing the Bone Labyrinth. When I started the Bone Labyrinth, there really were no restrictions on research in great apes. Medical research was being performed on great apes here in the U.S., and most other Western nations, had banned the use of great apes in research because they are such cognizant creatures.
Right.
And during the course of writing this book and publishing the book, eventually now the National Institute of Health has put a ban on future great apes medical research. So make some progress forward in regards to recognizing that these are unique creatures that deserve some respect and not to be abused.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great move forward. And yeah, I mean, although these are animals, you're absolutely right. I mean, they are aware of themselves. They have emotions. They have feelings, and it's just amazing that you kind of take that to the next level when you're writing them in these stories, and it really makes you feel as a reader that it gets you really connected to them. So I really appreciated it as a reader. I just thought it was very unique and very cool.
My goal was to try not to do it like a Disney version of the War Dog. You didn't want Kane breaking into a song in the middle of the book. Wanted to try to make them as authentic as possible. As, to take my veterinary background and how do dogs experience the world? How is it different from us? How do they consider that handler and people around them? And so that's something I want to explore in the book too.
Yeah, and Kane is a Belgian Malinois, and now these dogs can have up to 1,000 words or more vocabulary. And what I thought was amazing about this is that a lot of humans actually can make it to very rarely make it to 1,000-word vocabulary these days. But here's an excerpt from the book, and this is a string of commands that Tucker gives to Kane, and it's, quote, hide and seek, make noise, elude and cover, shadow attack, bravo. And the War Dog not only understands but can execute these commands. And so I just thought that was pretty amazing. Elaborate on that for us.
It is. I mean, when I wrote Kill Switch, I got a lot of feedback from readers, questioning whether these dogs could really perform what they were doing, whether I was making a Lassie or Rin Tin Tin version of the military war dog and, what their capabilities were. Well, I had a lot of trainers, handlers that were my resource material, and so when I finished the Kill Switch and I had them sort of review it, and if anything, their comments were the opposite. They were saying, what you're doing with Kane, you're probably pulling back on the reins a little bit, Jim. You could probably actually, they could do more than what you're actually showing on the page. And one of the things they really sort of were stressing to me is their ability to follow a chain of commands in sequence. So if you give a dog not just go fetch, the dog will fetches something, but they can actually give them a chain of commands, and they will follow them along in serial. So it's just amazing what these dogs can do.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, and they do really form that tight bond. I mean, eating, sleeping together, and very similar to canine units, here in the States, and oftentimes, retired handlers from the military become, canine handlers in the police forces when they come back.
Sure. That's one thing also I wanted to explore in this book is the fact that besides sharing this emotional bond, because they share this bond, of course we know that soldiers oftentimes suffer from PTSD, but so do dogs. So at the end of the leash, dogs also suffer from PTSD. Some of these military war dogs, and so in this book, Tucker is coming back from a fairly severe tragedy in Afghanistan after he's sort of retired. And so he's dealing with the aftermath of that, but so is his dog. And so that's something that I like to explore in this novel, too, is that PTSD is not just an affliction of the soldier, but also that four-legged soldier.
Yeah, absolutely. They have memories, and they recall, and they have feelings. Folks, by the way, we're talking with James Rollins, New York Times bestselling author, just released Warhawk. This is a Tucker Wayne novel, the second in this series. The first one was Kill Switch. Tucker and Kane came out of the Sigma series. If you're big fans of that, I know I am. I highly recommend checking out the Sigma series and the Warhawk. Question that I've got for you, and I know maybe this was in the works. I saw some things a few years back about maybe getting the Sigma series into the movies, and I understand De Laurentiis and Schumacher picked up the rights, but I know De Laurentiis has since passed on. So where are we at in that stage? I know all your fans are going to want to know about that.
Sure. Well, actually, we just signed with Lionsgate. They're right now they're turning Map of Bones, the first of the Sigma books, into a script. The scriptwriter is the same scriptwriter who comes out of the Marvel camp. He just wrote the script for the upcoming Black Panther movie, and right now he's working on the script of Map of Bones next.
That is great. So, from stem to stern, when are we going to see it on the big screen?
I have no idea. Pretty much, the author's kept in the dark. I'm lucky to find out anything when it comes to what's going on with the movie.
Yeah, it's just your book. No big deal, right?
Exactly.
It could be a few years, could be 10 years. Well, we're all looking forward to seeing that, and of course, although many movies are disappointments for readers out there, but we're hoping for a great one for sure.
Well, I always, people say, aren't you afraid that Hollywood's going to ruin your book? And I always just point to my bookshelf and go, well, the book's right there. They can't ruin it.
That's right. It's there. Just read it. Well, what's on the horizon? What's next? I know you have another series, the Order of the Sanguine series, and that's ongoing as well. So what's on the horizon? What else is going on?
Well, we completed the Order of the Sanguine series, so that is a trilogy, and we completed that. Though we do have some ideas, maybe continuing with that. But what's definitely on the horizon, coming at the end of this year, in December of 2016, is the Seventh Plague, which is the next of the Sigma novels.
Great. I know it seems like it comes out right around Christmas time every year.
Exactly.
And
and then right now I'm just researching and outlining and beginning construction on the Sigma novel that follows that.
Oh, very, very good.
Always something.
Always something. Well, we're excited about it. Huge fan. I really appreciate you coming on the show, talking to us about Warhawk and the Sigma series. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, it's been James Rollins on our entertainment segment right here on the Inside Real Estate Sports and Entertainment Show. Mr. Rollins, thank you so much. I hope you come back in the future.
I'd love to. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. You have a good night. Folks, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come on back. We'll see you in a few.